1. This malicious compliance is not my own. It was related to me by my mother many decades ago, but it is also not hers. She just got to play her part in this story. 1. This is the case of an intended malicious compliance being encountered by an even more malicious compliance. My mother is, at this time, a manager in the central processing office of a now-defunct major regional bank. Easily the largest bank in our region back in the day. She receives a rather odd check for processing, and refuses to run it until she has the full story on what is happening. So here's what she learns. A rancher has been in a land dispute with one of his neighbors, and it has not gone amicably. We are not privy to the exact nature of the issue, but it seems to have something to do with water rights. Either way, it ends up in court. And after a long, hard-fought battle of legal wills, the rancher loses and is ordered to pay a certain amount of damages to his neighbor by a certain date. Well, that is not a happy thing for the rancher, so he decides that, while he must pay, there is absolutely nothing in the court order that says he has to make it easy on his adversary. Malicious compliance engaged. He shaves a spot on the rump of one of his cows and carefully writes out the check for the full amount of the court-ordered damages on the skin of the bovine. He then has one of his trucks deliver the cow to his neighbor to settle the account. A live, chewing, pooping cow. After checking with the bank, the neighbor concludes that it is perfectly legal for the rancher to write a check on anything, and the rancher makes it perfectly clear that this is the only way he intends to settle the debt. But just like folks who decide to settle an annoying bill with thousands of coins sometimes find themselves victims of their own malicious intent, the neighbor's malicious compliance trumps the rancher's. The neighbor loads the cow onto one of his own trucks and takes it to the rancher's bank, the Bank of Issuance, and cashes it against a cashier's check made out to him for the same amount. This he then deposits at his own bank with no difficulty or challenge. Meanwhile, the rancher's bank has to order a truck and driver to deliver the cow check to its central processing office several hours' drive away. This is where my mother comes into the story. She has to cancel the check and process it. She uses a paper substitute to run through the computer system for it, just like they do for any checks that have come in that are too badly wrinkled or damaged to run safely through the system. After the cow check has been properly processed, and the money deducted from the rancher's account, she then opts to not store the check with the other cancelled checks, to return with his monthly statement, but instead orders it returned immediately to the rancher. And then, after the dust settles, the real fallout of the neighbor's malicious compliance is felt. Since the cow check involves a great deal of special handling at the bank's expense, the bank assesses appropriate fees that are more than cover expenses in processing it. If the neighbor cashes it at his own bank, he gets to pay those fees, but since he cashes it at the rancher's bank, the rancher now gets to pay what amounts to an additional 25% fee on top of the court-ordered settlement. The only cost to the neighbor was 10 miles of gas for the round trip to the bank, a trip he routinely makes anyway, and the time spent getting the bank to verify that the cow check is a legitimate instrument that can be cashed. When telling me this story, my mother tells me it is the most expensive check she ever processed. 2. I used to work at one of the top 4 most well-known pizza establishments. No, not the one named after a popular tile-based tabletop game, and not the one named after a father figure named Jonathan. Or the one named after a small amount of salad dressing named after a Roman emperor. That should narrow it down pretty well, right? Anyways, we had a customer who always called near closing and asked for extra black olives. I would always put exactly what we were told to put for toppings, then add the exact amount we were told to put for extra. Well, every time those people would call back and say there wasn't enough, that the cook hadn't put extra black olives on, even though I definitely had. Because I was the cook and the only one in the store at this time, since we would only staff one person in the store. The manager on duty and 1 or 2 drivers, between 10 and 11 p.m. So, because I made the pizza, I knew their claim about there not being enough was BS. But part of our training for complaints was BLAST: believe, listen, apologize, satisfy, and thank. So, even though I knew there were plenty of black olives, I'd make them another pizza and send it out. A lot of times, this would cause both myself and a driver to have to stay late, and these customers were extremely rude and never tipped. For some reason, they were always satisfied with the amount on the second pizza, even though I just remade it and put the same amount of extra on as the first one. That was because they were just trying to get a second free pizza, and it had worked for them numerous times in the past. Well, after going through the same thing nearly once every week or two for a couple of months, I decided I was done, and I would play a bit of a game of my own. The next time they ordered, when they called and asked for extra black olives, I decided I'd just go ahead and put a little more than extra on, so they wouldn't have to call back, right? Well, guess what? They did call back, and as always, very rudely claimed there weren't enough black olives. There were a ton of them. It was at this point I decided I would comply with their wishes, so on the second pizza, I covered the entire top completely with black olives. You literally couldn't see anything underneath them at all. The original extra olives pizzas didn't seem good to begin with, but to be honest, I knew this one probably wasn't even edible. The customer called back rudely yelling as expected, so I told them that I had put more than the amount we were supposed to for extra on the first pizza, and it wasn't enough for them. So I made sure I put enough on the second that they wouldn't have to call back for a remake, since they loved black olives so much. I also told him I knew the jig was up. I knew they were using the black olive thing to get free pizza, and that we weren't going to be remaking any more orders for them. Surprisingly, they did continue to order from us, but after that night, they were always fine with the amount of black olives on the first pizza sent out. 3. A little bit of context. I work in a manufacturing plant for a multinational company producing microchips. I am the shift lead engineer on a night shift for the front end of the week, Sunday through Wednesday. So there is very little oversight from management except when I see them in the morning on my way out the door. The machines we work on are huge, think Greyhound bus size, and require fairly strategic planning to get the most we can out of them. In recent months, the day shift team has been slacking on their scheduled maintenance items. Normally this isn't a big deal since we're understaffed just like about every other company in America right now, and we pick up the slack where we can on night shift. The machines run 24 hours a day, so if you have to pass work to the incoming shift it isn't an issue, as everyone tends to help out everyone. The problem comes in when day shift or the other end of the week moves scheduled maintenance off their shift, but don't move it in our scheduled work calendar. When the machines reach their critical threshold, they shut themselves down until the work is performed. This is normally at midnight on days I'm working. Well, as it happens, this has been occurring more and more over the past few weeks, and I've been letting my senior manager know that's why we've been seeing an availability drop, but not from lack of effort. He is a new senior manager, so I try to explain the critical thresholds to him, and how we need to keep at least the calendar accurate so we don't have any surprises by machines shutting themselves down unexpectedly. He didn't really seem to want to listen to this and brushed me off telling me, "If it isn't on the calendar, don't work in that machine." Cue malicious compliance. On Sunday night when I get into work, the schedule is completely empty, not uncommon for weekends. But wouldn't you know it, 3 maintenance items had been moved from the back end of the week and were never rescheduled. So at midnight, 3 machines shut down for maintenance. But I've been told if it isn't on the calendar, I can't touch those machines. I walk up to the production floor and tell all my technicians that we won't be working on any of those machines, as they aren't scheduled for us to complete. As per the area senior manager, we don't touch anything unless it's on the calendar. They've been getting more and more frustrated lately with this, so their eyes light up as I tell them we won't be completing any of the work. Then comes Monday morning. I tell the incoming shift and my direct manager about the machines, and they have a good laugh about the situation. It's only roughly 2 hours of work per machine, so I didn't completely screw over day shift. And then I run into my senior manager on my way out the door and casually let him know that we have 3 machines that have been down for 6 hours and need to be added to the schedule so somebody can start working on them. His eyes were about to pop out of his head as he says, "How could you let 3 machines sit down for half the night and not even start on them? Were there other machines down that stopped you from getting to them?" And I responded with, "Nope, you just told me if it isn't on the calendar, don't touch it." His face went beet red, and I saw the vein in his temple start throbbing, but he knew I was right. Since then, the calendar has been pretty dang accurate, and if I see a tool going critical, he's now informed me that I'm allowed to work on it to keep the product flowing. 4. Before I begin, I'd like to say I was willing to go full nuclear revenge with this, but luckily for the gentleman in this story, he resolved it after stage 1 of my revenge, hence the PettyRevenge. So a few years ago, a coworker of mine asked to borrow some money. I used to be someone that would help anyone if I could. I would find it hard to say no to a sob story and hated seeing people struggle if I could help. So I lent him £50, but with the proviso I'd get it back in a week. A week later I got it back and everything was good. A couple of weeks later I got a text message off him this time. Paraphrasing here, but the gist of the message was, "I need $200, I got bad people after me. Need to pay debt. I'll get the money back to you in a week." This time I was more apprehensive. For me, £200 was and still is a lot of money. Plus, the week after I was going away for the weekend, and I needed the money. But once again, me being the trusting, helpful idiot, I agreed. Around the same time this happened, I get added to a WhatsApp group he had set up with a few other people at work. Most of the messages were just a bit of shitposting with general other crap, but soon this guy was adding photos and videos of him getting off his head on drugs. A couple of lines before work with the message just having some breakfast. Videos of him and his mate getting off on it at night time. This is happening most days. A week comes and goes. This may come as a shock, but no sign of my money. I started messaging him, talking to him, asking where's my money. I'm going away this weekend, I need that money. I only agreed because you said I'd get it back each time I'd ask. If by text, most times no reply, and in person I'd just get excuses. I can't pay for my weekend away with excuses, dickhead. Fortunately, the friend I was going away with hooked me up, and I paid them back at a later date. I'd been lucky in life, and this kind of thing never really happened before. I don't need the stress of confrontation. Unfortunately, this left me unprepared for the situation. The back and forth of where's my money and the excuses continued for several more weeks. All while this is going on, this guy was posting in that WhatsApp group of him doing drugs. I knew this SOB had money, and it was all going up his fucking nose. Word started getting out at work of the situation, guy owing me money and not paying me. Some people called me an idiot, others said they would retrieve it on my behalf. I declined these offers. I could have informed work of his hobby, but again I didn't want the confrontation, and was still hoping to see my money. Now, I'm a patient person, but now I was really starting to lose my shit at this point. And what didn't help was rumors were starting to circulate. I was doing drugs with this guy at work. I'd been working at this place for a few years with no issue. This guy had only been with the company a few months. I was done. At this point, I was thinking I'd never see the money again. Now the rumors, I was royally fucked off. I started looking for a new job at this point. I didn't particularly like my job, but it was a wage and I need money to live. It didn't take long to find a new job, and while I worked my notice, I started working on my revenge. I'm not a vindictive person, but I wasn't going to let the loss of my money go, so I decided I was going to ruin this guy's life. I was planning on taking this guy's job, car, family, anything and everything I could destroy or take away I would. And the last part, if the police didn't get him, I knew some people willing to have a chat about the error of his ways. Remember, the WhatsApp group had given me most of the ammo I needed. Plus, I knew what car he drove, and I knew he always had drugs on him. On top of all that, he had also posted videos of himself driving dangerously and speeding in this group. It was easy to get everything I needed all in one group he made. The revenge. Stage 1 of my plan was to take his job and his accommodation. I forgot to mention work had provided him with accommodation. No job, no com. He had taken photos and videos of him doing drugs in the accommodation work had provided, and was easy to tell. Once I got word that Stage 1 was complete, I started working on Stage 2, turn his family against him. I'll be honest, this was a little harder for me personally. I was mad and wanted nuclear revenge, but the fallout from this would affect innocent people. But I wanted to make an example out of him. A few days before I was ready to start Stage 2, guess who turned up at my new place of work looking for a job? Yes, it was the guy. Now, I'd heard he found out I was the one behind his firing from the last place. There was only a few of us in the WhatsApp group, and even a fool could work out who had motive to pass the evidence to HR. I see him pull up his car and he sees me. At this point, I'm fully expecting a fight. Guy gets out of his car and walks over and starts asking why I did it. I just say, that's what happens when you don't pay your debts.
I told you I'm a man of my word and I'll pay you back.
You said you'd pay me back in a week. It's been over 3 months. Being a man of your words means paying on time. I told you I needed that money back in a week. I tell him that this was only the beginning and the only way to make it stop was to pay the money he owed. I did mention the WhatsApp group and hinted what I still had planned. He then proceeds, I kid you not, to pull a wad of cash out of his pocket, counts £200 and gives it to me. I agree to stop and he just goes back to his car and leaves. I guess we both learned a lesson out of this. For the record, I had to save for a few months to get that 200. That meant cutting back, putting £5–10 away when I could. I shared a hotel room to keep costs down, and my friend, who paid most of the bill, then also had to cover the 200 I'd saved for while I was there. Also, I could have a holiday. I wish I was in a position to write off the money. 5. I used to work in a pub-restaurant place, and anyone who's worked in retail or service will have dealt with managers like this. The kind of people who think that because they're in positions of power they're basically gods, and treat the majority of their staff like shit, with the exception of a few brown-nosers. I was working one Mother's Day, the busiest day of the year for us, and in the lead-up to it we were told there'd be no cigarette breaks, no additional breaks, and you were to bring something that was quick to eat for lunch, eat it, and get back to work as soon as possible. A few people disobeyed and took cigarette breaks. I don't smoke, so never did, and some people still took their full 30-minute lunch break. The number one brown-noser did both, and when he was on the floor he spent most of the time stood around just chatting with the managers and did very little work. I was one of the few people who obeyed their stupid rules, and I was one of the hardest workers they had, back when I naively thought promotions would be sorted through who demonstrated hard work and not who sucked up to the management the most. Number one brown-noser wasn't a supervisor at the time, but was looking to become one. So when we had a lull in the evening's trade, I nipped out into the washroom to have a quick drink and a bite of cake that I'd put in there for me to have later. Number one brown-noser walked through the washroom while I was doing this and didn't say a thing at the time. Now bear in mind, I was out there less than a minute. At the end of the shift, I got pulled into the manager's office. I foolishly think I'm going to be thanked for all the hard work I did today. That they even noticed that I did the majority of both the opening and closing jobs of the bar. We had to sign on a piece of paper to say which ones we'd done, and I was pretty much in every spot. But no, number one brown-noser had gone running to management about my unscheduled break. Despite arguing my case, it had only stopped for a very brief time when we weren't busy. It wasn't enough for them, and I got absolutely chewed out. Number one brown-noser would receive a promotion a few days later. Understandably, this made me resentful. I waited until I was on my first shift with number one brown-noser as the lone shift supervisor. Now, doing most of the opening and closing jobs to do with the place fairly regularly meant I knew the layout of the place pretty well. including where the blind spots were in the cameras. On this night, I was leaving just before closing, so did all the jobs I needed to, and then asked for number 1 brown-noser's help with sorting something out in the tap room. There are no cameras covering the outside of the tap room, and the supervisors and above were the only ones allowed access to the only set of keys they had for the whole building. So I asked him to give me access so I could do a quick stock check before I went home. And because I knew he was lazy, I knew he wouldn't stay there and lock up with me after like they were supposed to. And sure enough, he takes the keys out of the drawer they're in plain view of the camera, and outside the stockroom, he gives them to me saying, "You know where they go when they're gone." And as I watch him walk away, I see him miming putting them back into the drawer in front of the camera. I do what I need and pocket the keys. I then leave for home, and on the way throw them into the local canal. The pub can't lock its doors now, nothing is secure. I get a phone call from the manager asking if I have the keys. I truthfully tell him not anymore. Anyway, we're not allowed them, check with your supervisor. They check the CCTV and sure enough there's no evidence I ever had them. Number 1 brown noser isn't fired, but he's never trusted as a lone shift supervisor again while I'm there. And it cost him a fortune getting every lock in the building replaced. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream, episode 197. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd be so good as to hit the like button and share the video around with friends and family, I would appreciate it. Okay, I think we got a little birthday shout out to do today. And today's birthday shout out goes to Arkygirl 1966. The name's Bonnie, so I'm just going to sing that when I do the birthday bit. Hope you have a great birthday today, Bonnie. It doesn't mention your age. I could probably work that out. But, yeah, November 30th, your birthday. And you are, of course, as you're one of the November birthdays, you're allowed to celebrate through to the beginning of January. It's very hectic in the festive season. We need all the times to relax and just take care of ourselves that we can get. So please do take time to do that and do some of the things. Well, do all the things you love doing. You've got plenty of time to celebrate. Okay, now before I go, I'd like to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bonnie. Happy birthday to you. Okay, and I think, do we have? Yes, we do. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Alright, since we're in the festive season, and because I talk about food a lot anyway, dessert-related quirks that you have, things that you make perfect sense to you, but you've had other people raise an eyebrow at you when you've explained them. For example, with me, if I'm having a hot dessert, then I'll have cold custard with it, right? But if it's a cold dessert, then I believe it should be hot custard. And that just makes perfect sense in my mind. It's always, for me, a more pleasant experience. But some people just thought, really? Okay, well, if you have to, with the occasional raised eyebrow. But what tasty treats, what little methods and quirks do you like to have with your desserts that other people have never thought of? Give me some ideas I can steal. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.